Shabbat Shalom. Welcome to the third installment of After His Heart Ministries Midrash Rabbah 2.0, and this is the parasha of Vayetze. And we are going to talk a minute about Christian covenant versus Hebrew covenant. But before we do, we're going to finish answering the questions that have been posted in the Midrash channel on our ministry network. And we're going to go ahead and answer those first, and then we will get into the discussion about Christian covenant versus Hebrew covenant. All right. So, going to the Midrash questions. The question is, so is there a reason Jacob had to wrestle by himself? And is there some point that he did it at, or is there some point to that he did it at night? Because I'm feeling like there's some sort of timing thing with the time that he was wrestling, kind of an in-between identity phase where everything's falling off so your true self can come forth. Okay. Yeah, so we have some very interesting things we need to get into with the wrestling, don't we? Because we see in Jacob's dream that he saw Yahweh standing above the ladder, right? And so and this is important, basically, that this is important because he names the place Bethel, right? But then in this wrestling, which let's go ahead and go to that verse, that's actually going to be
32:22.
okay, 32:22. See here. Did that share? There it goes. Okay. I was having a technical difficulty. Okay, I'm going to switch over to, what am I doing in Exodus? Genesis 32. Yeah, so actually, that is next week's parasha. 32:34 is the beginning of next week's parasha. Let me show you. FFOZ Torah portions.
We'll save it for next week then.
Okay. Yeah. So see, the portion ends in 32:3, which means we'll just jump right into the rabbi's nugget. So let's go ahead and take a look at the rabbi's nugget question. Rabbi's nugget question is, what is so important about this whole parasha? Why should we pay close heed? And what role does this parasha play in our own lives? Yeah, okay. So let's talk a minute about the Christian belief in covenant, okay? When you are being introduced to, make sure I don't spill my drink. When you are being introduced to Christ and you are being introduced to Christian concepts, it usually begins with some sort of implication that you are actually bad and that you are actually not able to do good. And furthermore, the argument is that you are so bad and you are born this way that you actually are in such an offense to God that you actually are going to eternally and consciously suffer unless you accept Christ. And so when we talk about that, one of the things that we do is we recommend to people that they develop a relationship with Christ by studying the Gospels to get to know him. If you are Baptist, Calvinist, of Calvinist origins, I should say, like Presbyterian and whatnot, Congregationalist like Church of Christ, or Episcopalian like the Catholic Church, then you actually are not going to have the other element that is added into the charismatic church. The charismatic church encourages a relationship with the Holy Spirit, and evidence of that through speaking in tongues, right? Okay, so that is the concept. And there's a concept of being saved also. And then beyond that, there's a concept of not suffering the same fate as the rest of the world. So covenant for a Christian is an absolvement. Gosh, is that the right word? An absolving of sin? Yeah, absolution, right? Okay. So an absolving of sin, a connection to God as an inferior subordinate, and an interaction with the world as a unequal entity in standing. And those have been carried out to fundamental extremes. Obviously, the Inquisition was a belief that people needed to be delivered from hell, even at the expense of their own will. There was a belief in Protestantism that Catholics could not be delivered from hell. There is a belief in American progressive Christianity that says that fundamentalists can't be delivered from hell. There is always this exclusivity and this greater and lesser, so to speak. So let's talk a minute about energy systems in the universe and in the world. And Deborah, by the way, may comment. She's just off camera. But I'm sure that she may have some things to say about this, because obviously she is a healing arts practitioner. She's a massage therapist. And so she has an understanding about energies in the body and all that kind of stuff. So there are three types of energies. There are expansive energies, there are contractive energies, and there are corrective energies. Expansive energies are explosions and bursts of energy, um, always adding to something, always contributing more matter and mass to an already existent system. Contractive energies are energies that basically pull into themselves, usually remove, reduce, or subtract energy, and thereby take away from what is already present into oblivion, into nothing. An example of a massive contractive energy is a black hole. Less or more minuscule level energies would be um would be um tornadoes and other such cyclones and hurricanes and whatnot. When we talk about expansive and contractive energies, one of the things that we need to talk about is that there is an expansive energy within the system of God, and there's a contractive energy within the system of God. Expansive energy is extremely merciful and bestowing, and the contractive energy is extremely judgmental and withholding. But then we have these co-equal energies, and within these co-equal energies we have an interesting concept, and that is that one will pull and the other will pull back. But what's interesting is there will always be a balance. So if one energy starts to become too intensified, another energy will come along and reduce it, and vice versa. If something becomes too contracted, another energy will come along and increase it. Equal energy systems would be homeostasis in the body. Equal energy systems would be hydrostatic equilibrium in the H2O slash liquid or fluid centric, no, that's not the word, fluid intensive environment that we exist in. We exist in an environment of fluids. Our bodies are basically fluidic. Even our bones that are very dense actually flow at a very, very slow speed. So what is the reason why I bring this up is because the Christian God of the Bible at large seems to be very contractive. And what I mean by that is that there appears to be a constant state of wrath and a constant state of unrealistic expectation and a constant state of lack, decrease, and reduction, and diminishing, right? Diminishing in both reputation and diminishing in both, or I'm sorry, in both reputation and in physical abundance. For example, It is actually Christianity and not Jewish sects that came up with the first concept of a biblical justification for a vow of poverty. And when we get into this, we also look at things like, for example, the creation and implementation of the doctrine of hell and other numerous contexts of basically this being who does not have enough brains to understand the ignorance, frailty, and vulnerability of humanity. A couple things that I think are really, really important here is that we always read the story of Jacob as Christians as reaping what he sowed, right? Jacob is deceived by Rachel. Jacob is deceived by Laban. Jacob is under the threat of death by Esau, both at the beginning of the parasha and the end of the parasha. And basically, we have a context of Jacob being just this manipulative. I mean, I think I remember it was one of the Axis dictators that indicated that Jews, I think it might even been Hitler, that Jews are manipulators of, you can get down, Jews are manipulators of monies and power, and the proof is in this parasha, in this discussion about Jacob and Laban, right? Where Laban deceives him, and Laban is actually the bloodline of Jacob's father Isaac, right? And Bethuel is the bloodline of Abraham's father Terah, and they were deceptive and blah blah blah, and they were manipulative with money and with power, etc. All because of this particular thing that goes on between Jacob and Laban. But people miss some things. Now, I would tell you that I don't think that the World War II Axis dictators were legitimate Christians. In other words, they probably didn't have any business reading the Bible, but because the Bible is the history of the Jews, they found justifications for their behavior through the history of the Jews. Which brings me to a pretty valid point that we have a skewed understanding of Brit. We have a skewed understanding of covenant. Man, for a minute I couldn't speak English. That was weird. I was thinking of the word in Hebrew instead of English. But we have this skewed understanding of covenant because of anti-Semitism. Let me explain. Who taught us to be contractive in our understanding of covenant? Who gave us the idea in the first place that the new covenant would cancel all other covenants, and that any promises that Yahweh made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob would no longer apply? And the reason I bring this up is because if you start to think about the implications here, it starts to get a little bit emotional. At least for me, it does. And truth be told, is I'm not emotionally attached to being a Jew. I really am not. In fact, if I found Judaism to be contrary to my walk, I am vocal about it. I have a real problem with the fact that part of the Jewish folklore says that Jesus is boiling in feces in the lowest part of hell. I would definitely like to beat the brakes off the dude that wrote that. But I can tell you that doesn't mean I throw out the book. You see, that would be a logical fallacy. The logical fallacy of ad hoc, which basically says that if one part of a system is logically false, then all of the system is false. That's not true. That's a Christian thing, right? Okay, so where we get into a problem is in that there was no way that Christianity could hold on to. Remember, Christianity starts out. Let me qualify what I'm about to say. Christianity begins its origins in 325 AD at the Council of Nicaea. And when I say begins its origins, because Christianity is not the religion that Paul practiced. Let me make that clear. It's not the religion that Peter practiced. It's not the religion that James practiced. I have a friend.
It's definitely not the religion that Christ himself practiced.
No, it's not the religion that Christ practiced. In fact, it's not the religion that Christ established. Okay. 325 AD, they took a very anti-Semitic sentiment that they need to be different from the Jews. So different that they would practice pagan customs in order to demonstrate that they were not Jewish. Okay, so
enter Christmas and Easter.
Yeah, enter Christmas and Easter. Or at the time, Saturnalia in the Feast of Ishtar, right? Okay. And Bacchus, right? Okay. So at any rate, here is the part that is so off. Christianity teaches that covenants cancel other covenants. And Christianity teaches that new covenants override old ones. Let me tell you what this mentality comes from. This mentality comes from jurisprudence. It comes from law. It comes from English chancellery. Okay, can't say that word right today. Chancellery. Yeah, can't say it. Law. Okay, and I hope somebody makes a short out of that. In which a codicil overrides a testament. Okay, so one testament overrides another testament through the act of codicil. Codicil is a document that says this particular document overrides my previous wills and testaments and modifies the following. Thereby the New Testament being this. That's right. Comes right out of English law. Didn't us Americans do something with English law? No, actually, we didn't. In fact, the word bar itself is British Attorney Registry. So why do we have a British Attorney Registry in America? Oh, yeah, you don't want me to get started on that mess. But what's my point? My point is we should have learned something from the Revolutionary War and gotten rid of that kind of thinking and should have really kind of worked on our whole messianic thought process, right? Messiah did not come to do away with the law, right? Okay. If you follow this parasha correctly and not like the access dictators, you will find precious nuggets about covenant. So let's start at the beginning. What is covenant? Well, there's a couple things we need to know. First and foremost, whenever a covenant was made, it would use the word kathar. I think it's kathar. When it says in the English made a covenant, it actually in the Hebrew says cut a covenant. Why? What was important in covenant? The splitting of an animal. So what they would do is they would find a slope of earth, right? A hill. And it had to be enough of an incline where they could dig a little trough and a pit. And then they would take an animal and they would cut its throat and cut it in half. So they'd cut its throat and let its blood run down into the trough. And then they would cut it in half. And so there would be one half of an animal on each side of the trough. Okay. And then what they would do is they would the covenant maker and the covenant acceptor, because there's always an acceptor and there's always a maker, by the way. And I'll explain that in a minute. The covenant maker and the covenant acceptor would then go stand in the trough where the blood had ran down. But they would walk together through the two pieces beforehand. And the statement that was made is that if I or myself, if I or yourself, and of course they're both saying this to each other, it's reflexive, do not or fail to carry out the promises made here, may heaven make us like one of these. In other words, that we would be split in two by a sword, right? Okay. And so now they come together and put their feet together in this trough of blood. So everybody in that covenant now was standing in blood. Then, after they had called the witness that they would be in covenant by saying, let us be like one of these if we fail to complete or to carry out these promises. Notice I'm avoiding that word fulfill because y'all Christians just go goofy over that word. Okay. So the next thing that happens is the one side removes his weapons belt. And I'm talking about these are family lineage weapons here. Okay. We're not talking about some rusty old knife. We're talking about jewel encrusted hilted swords, right? And other weapons, spears, staves, etc. And they exchange weapons. And then after they exchange weapons, they sit and eat the meat that is the choice meat that is cut from the split animal after it has been sacrificed? No, after it has been barbecued on a stone barbecue, right? So they slaughter the animal. That's the Hebrew word that's translated in English as sacrifice. They barbecue, cook the meat so that it's edible, because by that time we have intelligence enough not to eat raw meat. They cook the meat, they sit beside the place of the covenant. I'm sure they probably don't eat in the presence of the dead animal, but they sit together and consume the animal in a state of what's called table fellowship. Table fellowship was, if you eat with me, then you'll fight with me. If you eat with me, then you will stand with me. And they eat that food together, consuming the animal, right? The choice cuts. Now, after they have consumed the food, then they have a nightcap, right? They both are poured a glass of wine. They toast to life and drink the wine. Why is this important? Because I want you to think about the level of curse and the level of responsibility that you are calling upon yourself when you enter into covenant. Oh, it gets better. When you enter into covenant, you have to produce collateral in exchange for the covenant on both sides. So both sides will have brought some sort of gift to the other. Okay. That is of enough value to demonstrate collateral for the covenant. Now, this is not a contract. This is not consideration. This isn't somebody has services or goods and the other person has monetary exchange. This is not contract. This is not will and testament. Although covenants were generational, meaning that your son had the option of continuing the covenant with you. But truth be told, is when you died, covenant was no longer obligated. But your son had an option to what? To continue the covenant. So now, the reason this is important is because of what comes next. And that is that part of the agreement in the covenant is that my land will be your land, and my people shall be your people, and my abundance shall be your abundance. In other words, you can dwell on my land, I can dwell on yours, and there will be no conflicts, no wars. There will be an agreement and equal distribution of abundance. So if your crop doesn't do well that year, we'll make sure you're fed. That's covenant. Where do we see all this play out? Abraham, right? We see Abraham in covenant with Oner, Eshcol, and Mamre. He dwells at the oaks of Mamre. Stop the presses. Those are Amorites. What did Yahweh say to Abraham about the Amorites in his vision about his descendants going to Egypt and going into slavery? The sin of the Amorite is not complete. Whoa. Who missed that? Who missed that his friends whom he was in covenant with, Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre, were Amorites? Friends, Amorites. Oh, but then it gets even better. he makes sure that they receive. Why? Because Chedorlaomer had attacked the Amorites. You see, Honor, Eshcol, and Mamre had suffered from the Amorite sorry, there was something weird going on outside my door with mail carriers. Honor, Eshcol, and Mamre had suffered from the Amorite attack, either at least in family distress, but potentially in loss of property. Doesn't matter, right? Because Yahweh says the sin of the Amorite is not complete. Okay, I won't go too much into the word sin, but I can tell you that it is defined by Torah, which means that those guys were in violation of Yahweh's Torah, right? They were in, hey, you come here and lay down. Come here. Get up here. You don't need to worry about them. Come here. Get up here. Come on. Don't make me make you part of a covenant. Get up here. All right. So the principle is that the Amorites were not in covenant with Yahweh, but they were in covenant with one of Yahweh's covenanted people. So what does Yahweh do? I'm sorry. What does Abraham do? He makes sure after he has taken the plunder from Chedorlaomer that he gives to Honor, Eshcol, and Mamre, who were Amorites. Now we move to Jacob. Okay. Yahweh makes a covenant with Jacob. How do we know? There was a statement, I will. If you watch part 2, I believe it is, you will remember that we covered the concept that in Hebrew grammar and thought, I will is a promise, not a statement that you'll do something, but is a statement of promise. And saying he or you will is an acceptance of that promise. And we see Jacob say, if you are truly going to do these things, here's what I'm going to do. I am going to give you 1/10 of everything that I receive. Gee, where he learned that concept from? How about his grandfather, Abraham, who consequently, just so you know, Jacob got to know for what?
15 years.
60 years?
15.
15 years. Thank you. Got to know for 15 years. And of course, Abraham is going to tell the story of his journey, right? And so then what happens? Then we have the statement that I will make this place the house of God. And of course, Midrash Rabbah says that Isaac had instructed Jacob to go up to Moriah. Now, what you don't know is that if you add all the different dates together of when Jacob was born, when Isaac was born, when Abraham died, when Esau was born, how old Esau was when he married his wives, we can deduce an age for Jacob when he goes to Haran. And what's interesting is there's a 14-year period missing from the story. In other words, Isaac sends Jacob away, but he instructs him to go learn from Shem and his yeshiva first, unlike his brother Esau, who went and learned from Nimrod and kills Nimrod and steals his magic, right? Jacob goes and learns from Shem. And Shem then does what? Shem then instructs him to return and speak with his father or follow the instructions of his father. That's what it was. Follow the instructions of your father. His father said, when you finish with Shem, go to the place where I was supposed to be sacrificed, and you will meet with God there. And of course, that is actually where Abraham was going to sacrifice Isaac, Mount Moriah. And so even though that there is a statement in the Torah that says that that place was Luz, right, originally, and so they find this tell and have concluded that this tell labels this city as Luz, and therefore that must be Bethel. The Midrash Rabbah, Jewish folklore, which of course Christianity is immediately going to say, oh, we can't trust the Jews, right? Because of the anti-Semitic spirit in the pagan Gentiles who claim to be in covenant with God, exclude Jewish folklore from their discussion, and therefore have eliminated this concept completely that Jacob was at Mount Moriah, and specifically where the cross was eventually going to be put in the ground years later. Meaning, as Deborah said this morning, Jacob saw the future of his descendants all the way up till Messiah. Now, the reason I bring this up is because when we watch the covenant play out with Jacob, we see something very interesting. And I'm going to show you what I mean. Abraham says, or God says to Abraham, I will make your descendants as this thing, right? And then Abraham kind of seems to interact with God a little bit. And we brought this up in part 2 of the Midrash today. And I said, look, this is how Abraham speaks to God. This is how Isaac deals with God. But Jacob does something. And until you realize this, you will not understand covenant. But after today, you will love it. I'm going to tell you right now. I have a strong witness to have these discussions and midrashes to give people in my congregation who have advanced in knowledge and opportunity to speak because of the concept that 2 are better than 1. But there are times when there are things that are going to be important enough that I'm going to take the time to actually teach them, and this is one of them. But I want to make clear, you all are welcome to interrupt, but please make sure that, number one, that it is context similar. And also, I would really prefer questions more than I would statements at this point, because I'm going to teach you something, okay? So, in Hebrew thought, until incomplete action becomes a completed action, a covenant is not activated. Let me explain what that means. That means that you guys, you Christians, goofiness that you experience when you hear the word fulfill is completely off when it comes to the not magnitude, not veracity, the vast misunderstanding. What's the direction I want to go. The vast misunderstanding of fulfillment. You see, until a covenant is actually demonstrated in action, it is not real. You see, there is a thing that happens in Hebrew grammar called the conjunctive vav. Okay. And the conjunctive vav is basically a time switcher. So if I was to say, I will build a house, right? I would say, let's see, how would that go? That would go, well, okay, so it would be Evni Bayit. I would build a house, right? But if I say I've built a house and I have and before it, because so maybe I planted a field and I built a house, the conjunctive vav switches the tense. This is how it actually would read in the Hebrew. And I will build a house. Now, how it would be understood is I've built a house. That little vav switches the tense. And so oftentimes you'll see, and God spoke, and it'll say, he will speak, and then put the and in front of it. What's my point? My point is that Hebrew grammar tends towards the perfect by using the imperfect as a beginning point. Meaning what? Until it arrives at the perfect, it is not complete. Okay? That's why they call it the perfect and imperfect instead of the past tense, present tense, future tense. Okay? In Hebrew, until you have carried out the promise, you are not telling the truth. You're a liar. So what's interesting is now we need to ask the question, if that be true, then one could argue that if you're in covenant with someone and they've made a promise, if you do anything to hinder that promise, you are making them a liar. And if that be true, then you need to do everything in your power to create an opening for promise to be activated. Oh man, you got to see where I'm going with this. So, what did Jacob need to do? Listen, he went to Shem first to learn about Torah, to learn about the mysticism of God, to learn about the power of the Hebrew people. He did not have to go to Haran. He was gone long enough for Esau to develop the forgiveness that he would need to develop. Because just like Ishmael and Isaac buried Abraham, we will find in this next parasha, Esau and Jacob bury Isaac. And so I think we need to kind of understand that Jacob makes the choice to go to Haran in order to carry out an activation of covenant. And I'm going to tell you where this gets really relevant. In the sun setting at Moriah, Beersheba, the place of the oath, is a well. And then he arrives at Moriah, no well. And then he arrives at Haran, and there's a well. Remember, I've taught you that when Torah leaves something out, pay attention. There was no well at Moriah. And guess who caught on to that? Paula Kay. And what Paula Kay caught was the idea that at every place where Jacob experienced something, she called it spiritual. But truth is what she was saying was there was some sort of supernatural occurrence that made his physical life experience the promise of covenant. And so where we would set something as something that would be a covenant means promise or contract, we now see that one of the responsibilities of the covenantee is to take opportunity for that covenant to play out. So Yaakov travels to Haran. Now, Haran actually in the Hebrew, I believe, means I believe it means anguish. No, it means alien, like sojourner or stranger, right? It's actually a word, it's not a cognate, synonymous with exile, galut, right? Galut, where we get the name Goliath. A galut is somebody who's in exile, but a Haran is an exile. So the action of being exiled is Haran. And here's the crazy part about it is what happened. Abraham was exiled with Terah from Nimrod. And his son, Terah's son, died when Nimrod tried to kill Abraham. You can get down. And so one of the principles that we need to then get our minds wrapped around, and this is important, is that when you are in covenant with someone, you need to make sure you're not hindering the process. And so what is Jacob say? Let's read it. Let's read what Jacob says to Yahweh when the covenant is actually made in Genesis chapter 24. I will share my screen. Okay, here we go. So when we go to, okay, let's see, I'm just going to go to, I'm sorry, not chapter 24, chapter 28. I don't know why I keep going back to chapter 24. I better go back and read that today. Okay, so Beersheba, okay, so now Jacob responds with, Jacob also made a vow saying, if God will be with me and will keep me on this journey that I take and give me food to eat and garments to wear, and I return to my father's house in safety, then Yahweh will be my God. However, that word is not safety. That word is shalom. Right? Let's see. Well, maybe it's not. Yeah. Oh, yeah. There it is. Shalom right there. Not safety. In fact, that word is never translated safety, is it? No. What's the Hebrew word shalom? to be in a covenant of peace or be at peace. Right? Okay. And it is to be complete and in need of nothing. Look, here's the first Strong's reference, used 236 times. Okay? Has nothing to do with safety. It has to do with completeness. And I can tell you the concept within completeness is that of a vessel being full. Completeness means to be full, to be filled, to be put up to the brim of the pot. Okay. So getting back into the screen share real quick. So then this is what is actually happening in let's see, we want to go here. Okay, this one has died on me real quick. Let me fix that. There we go. All right. And it says, and I return to my father's house in Shalom, then Yahweh will be my God. And this stone which I set up as a memorial stone, this will be God's house. And if everything that you give me, I will assuredly give a tenth to you. Now, couple things that are important here. First is, what does Yahweh say that he's going to do with Jacob? He says, I am Yahweh, the Elohim of your father Abraham and the Elohim of Isaac. The land on which you lie I will give to you and your descendants. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west, to the east, and to the north, and to the south. And in you and in all your descendants shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Behold, I am with you, and I will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land. For I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. Okay? And then Jacob turns around and says, if God will be with me and keep me on this journey and that I take and give me food to eat and garments to wear, I will return, and I return to my father's house in Shalom, then you will be my God and I'll give you a tithe. Okay, let's talk about something. First of all, and you could speak up if you want to, but I have a question for those who can respond to this question. Do you think if Jacob had gone to yeshiva for 14 years, which is, by the way, yeshiva is 7 years to become a rabbi and 14 years to become a rabbi of rabbis. If he had gone to yeshiva for 14 years, then there's a number of years actually in the travels, so to speak, and he arrives at Moriah and is still going to go to Haran, right? But he arrives at Moriah. Do you think Jacob was afraid? Yes or no, and why? When he makes these statements to Yahweh at Moriah, do you think he was afraid?
No, because he was in covenant and he knew he would be protected.
Okay. So when he says, if you give me garment to wear and food to eat, where have we heard those words before?
Yeshua.
He says, take no thought for what you will wear or what you will eat or what you will drink. And then he gives examples as to why Yahweh should be trustworthy and you not taking thought, right?
But he also says,
Yeah.
If you had done these things for the least of these, you have done it to me.
Right. In other words, we are to provide it, which is where the tithe comes in. The tithe is for the poor, the Levite, and for yourself at the feast. At the feast days. Okay. So, tithe. Tithe goes to the poor, correct? Listen to this now. If the tithe goes to the poor, the Levite who does not have an inheritance, to the stranger, right, who lives among you, and to yourself, so that you can go up to Jerusalem, the question is, are you going to sneeze or not? Poor dog. The question is, what then is supposed to happen to you? If the tithe is supposed to be given to the poor, then what state are you in? This is very important. When Jacob says, if you do these things, I'll give you a tithe of everything that you give me. And he says, if you give me garments to wear and food to eat, I'll give you a tithe of everything you give me. What is he actually stating there? I don't intend to be poor. I want you to think a minute about this concept. If you are giving a tithe, if you are commanded by Torah to give a tithe to the poor, then what are you commanded to be?
Commanded to be rich.
Not poor. You're supposed to be in a state of abundance in such a way that you are able to equally distribute to the poor after you yourself have made sure that your feast days are complete. You spend money on you first. You pay you first. That commandment comes first. Then the poor, then the Levite, then the poor. And I propose to you that one of the reasons for that sequence is that in biblical economics, you pay yourself first. Gee, wonder who said that before? Warren Buffett, Napoleon Hill. Oh, yeah, David Ramsey. Guys, these are millionaires. Okay. All right. So Jacob says, I intend to be rich. So let me go ahead and just make a commitment. I will, remember Hebrew grammar, I will give a tithe of everything that you give me. Okay, now we go to Jacob's days with Laban. First, Jacob does something interesting. He offers a very, very expensive dowry for Rachel that requires 7 years of service to Laban. 7 years. Now, what you guys don't know is that I believe it is Midrash Rabbah, Rashi, and the Talmudic writers all say that Jacob was 77 years old when he arrives at Haran, which would make him 84 when he gets Rachel. Yeah, that one, that's a crazy one. Okay, so what's the point? The point is that Jacob serves Laban not the way that you would think. He does not serve him as a hireling. He serves him as an agent. He runs Laban's business for him. And through that entrepreneurship, he gains partnership status with Laban. And through that partnership status, he's able to create a profit through something very interesting. And this is the rabbi's nugget. Somebody unmute, or Deb, tell me, how did Jacob get his wealth?
By increasing the flock.
And how did he do that?
Well, he had another dream how to do that.
Selective breeding.
Selective breeding. That's right. But what's interesting is the way he does the selective breeding. If you don't pay attention to it, you won't get it. How does he do it? You said he had a dream?
Yeah, it says in there he had a dream about how to do it.
Do you know where that verse is at about the dream?
With the sticks?
With the sticks. He had a dream about it.
Yeah. It's in 30.
Yeah,
25.
30-25.
Yeah, that's where it starts. 29 says, you yourself know how I served you and how your livestock has fared with me, for you had little before I came, and it has increased abundantly. And the Lord blessed you wherever I turned.
Yeah, and he says, what shall I give you? And Jacob said, you shall not give me anything. If you do this one thing for me, I will again pasture and keep your flock. Let me pass through your entire flock today, removing from there every speckled or spotted sheep and every black sheep among the lambs, and spotted or speckled among the goats, and those shall be my wages. He literally says, let me take the blemished flock, right? But then it says, so my honesty will answer for me when you come concerning my wages. Everyone that is not speckled or spotted among the goats or black among the lambs, if found with me, will be considered stolen. Laban said, good, let it be according to your word. So he moved them on that day the striped or spotted male goats and all the speckled and spotted female goats, every one with white on it, and all the black ones among the sheep, and put them in the care of his sons. And he put a distance of 3 days' journey between himself and Jacob fed the rest of Laban's flocks. Then Jacob took fresh rods of poplar, almond, and plane trees, and peeled white stripes in them, exposing the white that was in the rods. Okay. And he set the rods which he had peeled in front of the flocks in the drinking troughs, that is, in the watering channels where the flocks came to drink. And they mated when they came to drink. So the flocks mated by the rods, and the flocks delivered striped, speckled, and spotted offspring. Then Jacob separated the lambs and made the flocks face toward the striped face toward the striped, and all the black in the flock of Laban he put in his own herds apart, and did not put them with Laban's flock. Moreover, whenever the stronger of the flock were mating, Jacob would place the rods in the sight of the flock and the drinking troughs, so that they would mate by the rods. But when the flock was sickly, he did not put them in, so the sickly were Laban's and the stronger were Jacob's. So the man became exceedingly prosperous, and large flocks, and female and male servants, and camels and donkeys. Okay. So does this first bother anyone? Is there anything in this that we could say would be indicative of something bad or something of darkness? I think we might need to turn on the lights. You get that? Thank you. Is this witchcraft? I think the dream part is probably in Jubilee's bin.
So
No?
today, I just
Oh,
looked at it.
okay. Anybody want to take a shot at it? Is this witchcraft? Is this, what is this? What's he doing here? I will tell you that since this is the nugget, I'm not going to be quick to just give you the answer. Okay. But I do want to midrash this a little bit, because I can tell you, number one, we're kind of sort of out of time. The sun is set, Shabbat is over, but I want to explore this a little bit before we get off. So what is Jacob doing here? What do you guys think? Is this too hard to comprehend or to accept, considering that we, for all intents and purposes, are used to the people of God asking God if it be his will and making sure that it is within his, purpose and plan and all that other stuff? Is Jacob doing what Rachel was trying to do? Is he being deceptive here? Or is he doing something that we don't understand because we're of Christian origin? Obviously, me throwing that in there, you know the answer. But the point is still, what exactly is going on here? Anybody want to take a stab at it? I'm sure some of you are probably looking up commentary or asking ChatGPT. I know that's a common practice. Nobody, huh? You're still looking for the dream, so you're not really.
I found it.
Okay.
It's 30.
It was just downright trickery.
Downright trickery. Okay, we'll address that in a minute. Paul K says downright trickery. Okay, what is it, Deb?
It's 31:10.
31:10.
Mhm.
Ah, yes. And it came about that at the time when the flock was breeding, that I raised my eyes and saw in a dream, and behold, the male goats that were mating were striped, speckled, or mottled. Then the angel of God said to me in the dream, Jacob's, and I said, here I am. He said, now raise your eyes and see that all the male goats that are mating are striped, speckled, or mottled, for I have seen everything that Laban is doing to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a memorial stone, where you made a vow to me. Notice it said an angel of God, and yet it's speaking as God. There's that whole Moloch concept. But yes, amen. That is, and I knew it was either in Jubilees or Yasher or something like that. But what's the point here? Oh, but if you knew, yeah. So um um Paul K says downright kickery. All right, so let's see if we can lay this out. I have in the past told you that I have scriptural proof and that I have a belief that is, for me, undeniable, that the entire universe as a creation, according to Paul, is in some state. And that state is the dominion of Adam. And that dominion results in the creation of something out of something as a result of the heart and desire of Adam and the intention of Adam, right? And his sons. And so as a result of this, we have something that the New Agers call deliberate creation, where they believe that you, no matter what, are in a state of drawing to yourself the things that come into your life. Meaning what? Meaning that you demonstrate to the universe that that's what you wanted. Now, here's the part that's important. Yahweh sends an angel and says, I have seen the game being played here. I'm going to deal with it. So what does Jacob do? Jacob says, okay, then I am going to go ahead and I'm going to walk in that. And so what does he do? He places something striped or spotted in front of the goats. Why? So the goats would look at it and all of a sudden their DNA would imprint and all of a sudden they become spotted? No. So that the message was clear to the universe which ones he wanted. Jacob was activating the covenant through a physical action. You know, this might even lean in the direction of the discussion I had with Josh about a week ago about vision boards. It's the idea of setting before yourself the thing that you want so that when it happens, you remember that it happened. In other words, there is a physical responsibility present in the people who are in covenant with Yahweh to activate the covenant. Christianity has communicated to you that covenant is about sitting around, in a lot of ways, sitting around waiting to die, but sitting around and waiting for God to do something. And yet that is not what we see in Acts. That is not what we see in the New Testament. That is not what we see in the prophets. Y'all want a fun one? Why does Elijah, a prophet of God who is able to stop the storms and start the storms and control the weather, because that fire from heaven in Second Kings, I think it's chapter 2, is lightning. And the fire from heaven at at Mount Carmel is lightning, and he stops the rain and he starts the rain. Why does that man, with all of his wisdom and his statements about idolatry and witchcraft that he makes to Jezebel and her prophets and to Ahab and all of the other things, take a staff, hand it to his servant Gehazi, and sends him to run and put that staff upon a dead kid? And you think you understand everything about Scripture. You think you understand the Bible. You think that you have it all figured out. You sit there and you say, you know what? I have read the Bible for 30, 40, 50 some years, depending on who you are. And I understand this, and I believe this, and I am this thing with God, and da 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 da. And I'm telling you right now, you don't even understand that Elijah believed that staff would resurrect that kid. Did it? No. But he believed it would. And perhaps, maybe, just maybe, it started the process. But y'all can't handle that. I can tell you there are things you do not understand about the power of the covenanted, the person who is in covenant with Yahweh, the power of anointing, the power of objects, the power of energy work, because you are so caught up in Catholicism. You say, no, I'm a Protestant, or no, I'm a non-denominational Christian. Now, you're still buying into the Inquisition, believing that that the intensification of all power in the universe could get so impatient with its ants that it just decided to start squashing them all because they didn't build the ant pile correctly. Oh my goodness. What's my point? My point is before you think that you got everything figured out, think about that Jacob decided which ones he wanted and put the poplars in front of him so that Yahweh would know which one he wanted. Wait a minute. Wouldn't Yahweh already know that? Yes. But what was Jacob doing? He was activating the covenant. Can't say Shabbat Shalom to you because the sun is down, but I can say Shavua Tov to you. But before I go, does anybody have any comments, questions, thoughts concerning all this?
So those striped sticks were the action that he took to affirm that he understood what God was going to do for him and what his part was. And that's how he gained his wealth.
Right. Here's how I want you to think about it. Let's say that you have become financially, and now that the sun's down, we can really get into this. You have become financially independent. Okay. Your passive income exceeds your expenses by double what your expenses are. You don't have to worry about money. You have all your tax shelters set up, all of your trusts set up, all of your corporations set up. You've hidden all your assets, blah, 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 blah. Now your child comes along and does something absolutely amazing to just make your life feel that much more fulfilled after you're already stupid rich. And so you ask that child, what do you want? I will give you anything that I have. Because you feel so blessed by that child that you are willing to allow them to choose what they want. That is how you need to think about the covenant with Yahweh. Basically, in short, in its simplicity, we could get into the fact that really what Yahweh says in all of his covenants is, I will give you more than you need. I will give you more than you need in political influence. I will give you more than you need in spiritual wisdom. Or how about we just go philosophical wisdom? I'll give you more than you need in spiritual power. I'll give you more than you need in mental strength. I'll give you more than you need in emotional comfort. That's what he says in all of his covenants. Jacob is the only one who actually activates it. You know, I can't remember who said it or where it was written, but it says that Jacob was a master Kabbalist. And I will tell you, at the core of mastering Kabbalah is how to stop, that's one, and allow God to work. Instead of killing Uriah the Hittite, who had already declared his position by continuing to be a Hittite and not an Israelite, or by committing adultery and not waiting for her to be available, when you know that Yahweh's already demonstrated he could kill a husband, Yahweh's already demonstrated that he can bring any wife to you, Yahweh's already demonstrated that you don't even have to be treacherous to take the throne. All you have to do is allow the system to work. But what we do all day long is trade mandrakes for a night, or gain mandrakes in a belief that it's somehow going to make us pregnant. That's what we do all day long. Don't get me wrong. Jacob had to make an effort to have the covenant activated. Jacob had to walk within the belief system of the promise itself. That's faithfulness. Oh my gosh, if you guys really understood faithfulness, you would not be walking around with this idea that you don't believe enough. True faithfulness is standing steadfast upon a promise. If I promise Gabriel that I am going to teach him something and I never do it, and someday he comes to me and says, hey, you never taught me that, then in principle, I am actually a liar. But if I promise him and I give him opportunity to learn, what does he have to do? He has to learn. Right? Now, in principle, what we need to understand from that is that we have to make an opening. We have to create a space. We have to create a vessel that can be filled. and not an unstable one. It's big, isn't it? It's the depth of the concepts, right? It's the depth of Torah. Questions, comments, thoughts?
Today was really good.
Well, Paula K, thank you for your participation, for one thing, in posting the questions on Slack to begin with, but also for hanging around with us. And I want to say, I'm glad that you brought up today that you had been with us for as long as you had, and you had learned so much. You know, I want to acknowledge, and I want to posit to you who watch on YouTube, or you who are a part of the congregation. And there's people who have asked how to get into the congregation, and I've said to text me, and I've even had people email, but they never got back to me. So the premise is, in its simplicity, that the people in this congregation who have been here for a while have learned, need an opportunity to actually practice what they've learned. Let me tell you what used to happen in this congregation because of that fact. People would leave because they'd learn, and I would repeat things, and they go, oh, well, I already know that. And then they'd leave because they would think in their minds, the only way in which I'm going to be able to do this is if I go somewhere else and practice it. So I opened up the floor to Midrash and stopped just standing in front of a camera teaching, so that we could get some input from other people, give a voice to those who have learned, give an opportunity for people to practice this. Sun's down, so I'm going to say that probably, I want to say within the next year, we're actually going to do an entire biblical finance course. And I don't know whether I'm going to put it behind a paywall or not, but I can tell, well, I probably am, but I can tell you that that is going to be all based upon Torah, the Psalms, the prophets, and the New Testament as a whole of different principles of economic success. And I can tell you that it will probably draw upon things. There's probably some mentions of some things in Jubilees that would be important, in Jasher that would be important. So it will draw from some other texts. I think there's probably some legitimacy in some of the stories that Baal Shem Tov taught, et cetera, even potentially Baal Sulam, Rabbi Ashlag, etc., about abundance and about expansion, contraction, and whatnot. Covenant is expansive. And here in this parasha is proof. Covenant is expansive. Okay? All right. Shavua Tov.
Shabbat tov.
Have a good evening.
Bye, y'all.